They may sound nuts, but so do the Wright brothers. Now, here's Flieger and Briggs.
Oh, the joys of live radio. So if you were already listening live, you're hearing the beginning of this show again, as unfortunately it seemed like something knocked the board out. It looks like some of you may have been hearing Mr. Briggs remotely, but you weren't hearing me in the studio, and then the whole thing sort of dropped out. So what we're going to do, we're just going to start all over again, pretend that didn't happen. Like the rest of the world, just that 11 minutes, 12 minutes is just going to have been lost, and we'll do it again. We probably won't talk about the same thing for the 8.5 people who are listening live, Rick. But we can. But if this is the first time you're hearing it over here on SoundCloud and otherwise, welcome into It's Just Sports here on the 12 Ounce Sports Network. Check out everything at 12ouncesportsnetwork.com, at 12OC Sports on Twitter, and you follow us at Asylum Football on Twitter, and It's Just Sports 123 at gmail.com. Rick, do I still have you now? There's the gremlins in the system today.
Oh, yeah, you still have me. And for those of you that did catch my audio part live, congratulations, because that was radio gold that will never happen again.
That'll be known as the lost tapes, where Rick having a one-sided conversation with himself.
And it was a good one, too.
Yeah.
It was, maybe we can record that and put it on some bonus coverage somewhere. But we were actually covering the NHL controversy about having the draft before the season was finished and how it would affect some of the deals, backdoor deals through trades that were made in the previous years. And it could be really significant. So that's something we'll have to revisit here once the decision is actually made.
Yeah, to get back to that, to wrap it up for anybody who was listening live, and if they stuck with us through the couple minutes of silence till we got rebooted here, what I do find strange with this, and it almost has to be about this trade market. Well, no, it doesn't. I guess I don't understand. This is a very NHL thing, I think. Of all the sports, why would the NHL be worried about getting their draft in now? Look, the NFL, you certainly understand why they had to get it in, right? It's their probably after the Super Bowl. Can't be true, but it feels like it, especially this year, like their second biggest event. You know what I mean? This is major TV. The NBA draft does a good number. Other than baseball, which gets no coverage, who watches? Have you ever watched an NHL draft? I don't even know. The NHL Network may air it. I've never watched one. What do they care? They draft the day before the season starts. It's not like you're losing any revenue there.
No, it's one of those drafts that, like when I can remember when Sidney Crosby was drafted, like in 2005, where Mario, I believe, was 84 or 85. You remember a few of those picks where they went.
The pick, yeah.
Yeah, you're even maybe the top 5 or 6, but after that, it's kind of like, okay, Sergei Petrogrov, he went to Buffalo. Great. We'll see how he turns out, but it's not like anything I could care less about, watching on television.
No, so it's kind of interesting. They would take that hard line of all sports, really. Again, the NFL I get, the NBA I get. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let's spin it back to the NFL, Rick. Big news over the weekend is Andy Dalton signs with Dallas, not with Jacksonville, and not with New England, as most people, myself included, predicted that he'd have been in one of those two places. Going to go back up Dak Prescott in Dallas. 1 year, $3 million with bonuses up to $7 million. I don't think there's any doubt. Fantastic for Dallas, right? You talk about if you got to go on a 5 or 6 game stretch with a backup quarterback, you can do a whole heck of a lot worse than a guy like Andy Dalton. What I'm surprised by is the national narrative, and you see it all over social media, all over the networks. Maybe it's just because there's nothing else going on and we're trying to make more of it as it is. But that this signing says something about Dak Prescott and getting his deal done, that can't be, right? There's just no way.
No, I can't see that at all. Well, I agree with you. I think it's a splendid move for the Cowboys. It's a great move for Andy Dalton, who is now on a team that has some really aspirations of being able to go deep into the playoffs and not to the Super Bowl. What I think this does realistically for Dak Prescott is gives him Look, I know he's been in the league and he's actually been thrown up there with some of the superstar names, but this is going to give him a very important mouthpiece or earpiece, however you want to do it, a mentor. I mean, this guy's been around, like you said, Andy Dalton. You could do a lot worse as a backup, and I mean, he wasn't. He was on a starter on a crummy team for years, and I think this is only going to benefit Dak Prescott through Dalton's experience and just talking and talking about coverages and this, that, and the other, and people's habits, what have you. Just a brilliant move, I think. This doesn't say anything that the Cowboys don't like Dak Prescott, but I think they're looking, realistically, maybe they want to see Dak go to that next level a little bit. He's probably already better than Andy Dalton, but there's something about experience and knowledge. I mean, just because you're not the most talented guy in the world, look at most of the coaches. They were never Hall of Fame players, but they know the game. And this is a great move the whole way around as far as I look.
Oh, yeah, absolutely from that. But like I said, it's funny, the narrative that, now they've got their backup plan and they're not going to get.
Because all they want to do is start something.
Yeah.
That seems to be the culture of media. I mean, we say social media, but it's just the media in general anymore. They throw something out there and see what they can get going.
Right, yeah, and it's just nonsense. Look, they're going to get a deal done. There's no doubt they're going to get a deal done. As great of a backup as Andy Dalton's going to be and as good of a starter as he could have been in some places, Chicago perhaps, I'd take him over Nick Foles and certainly over Trubisky, who we'll get into in a minute here. But nobody believes for a second that Andy Dalton is competition for Dak Prescott. And if you believe that, you're a fool. And if you think Andy Dalton gives the Cowboys a better chance to win than Dak Prescott, again, you're a fool. That's a foolish thing to say. So you can push that. What's really interesting, Rick, for so many years, as long as I can remember, there was maybe 10 or 12 quarterbacks in the league you could sort of trust now. You look around the league this year, Rick, you've got Jameis Winston in a backup role. You've got Andy Dalton in a backup role. You're going to have Cam Newton in a backup role. There's actually a glut of quarterbacks, not great quarterbacks. Those are still very rare, but there's a glut of, in most years, Andy Dalton would have gotten paid like Matt Stafford did just because there'd be 6 teams so desperate for his services, competent starting quarterback services, and that's just not the case this year.
No, and Tannehill wasn't a great example as a backup. I think they were kind of on the outs with Marcus Mariota. I use him as an example, but okay, you pull in Teddy Bridgewater. He'd come back from that injury, but here's a guy that has some experience, had played. You look at Kansas City. Matt Moore when Mahomes was out for a couple games. Not that flashy quarterback, but he's a veteran. He's smart. He knows what to do. And in contrast, you look at the Pittsburgh situation. I think teams sit here and think, you know what? We can get Andy Dalton for $3 million. Hop aboard. I mean, that is a smart move. Chicago did the same thing, bringing in Nick Foles. Maybe not your favorite guy, but he certainly has proven himself in a backup role, which I think he's going to be the starter. They, like we said about Mitch Trubisky, we'll get into him not picking up that 5th-year option. So, I mean, they're on the outs with him and making plans. So, yeah, I mean, but you're right. It seems to be, and Cam Newton, who knows where he's going. Everybody's kind of like hands off, like this guy's a hot potato right now. And they're not – and I don't blame them. I've never been a real Cam Newton fan. This guy's not going to come cheap, I don't think, like Andy Dalton is. And at least to start with. And I think people know that. He's going to be a last resort signing, I believe.
Yeah, it's starting to look that way, right? Where somebody, a Pittsburgh, I don't. It doesn't matter. Teams without a solid backup. We'll use this. Probably, yeah. Those kind of teams. But that guy's going to have to go down in camp, early in the year, and then you see
Right.
Cam Newton get that call. I think the problem with Cam Newton, I've been thinking a lot about this because, just not knowing anything about personality or anything, if I was sitting there making the decision between Jameis Winston and Cam Newton was the MVP of this league not all that long ago. But I think, I don't want to say it's ego. I don't necessarily know that. We know he doesn't handle losing well. We know he wears great hats, all the things we know about Cam Newton. But I think
he does have great hats.
If that doesn't happen where he just sits and rots on the vine until a starting quarterback goes down, I think he needs to be, and we need to start looking at situations very similar to the Jameis Winston thing. Look, if you're Jacksonville, if you're Washington, his name keeps coming up there with Ron Rivera being there. If you're any number of those teams where you haven't established at least someone you have said is going to be your starting quarterback, but there's some question marks there. And you got Cam Newton in the background. This becomes a big distraction, right? Cam Newton believes he should start. Probably half your fan base is going to think he should start over whoever you have. Half the media is going to think that. He's a very polarizing guy. He needs to step in behind a Ben Roethlisberger, the way Jameis Winston stepped in behind a Drew Brees. There's nobody going to be beating a drum for Jameis Winston to start over Drew Brees unless he has some 5-game in a row clunker that he's never had in his career. Go to a Seattle, go to a Kansas City, somewhere where there is an established no-doubter first, nothing Cam Newton can do outside of, going all Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan on the starting quarterback's knees. We're not even going to have this discussion. He has a good year, makes a little money. We see the markets now between Jameis got $1 million, Dalton got $3 million, so somewhere there's your range. That's what you're going to have to take. Be a good teammate. Now you're looking for another starting gig next year. I think those are the places we need to start looking. He ain't going to New England. New England's, they've made it abundantly clear now. Stidham's the guy. And we'll see if Belichick's right. Far be it for me to question Belichick on matters such as that. But we got to still stop looking at these teams where he can go and start. And if he signs before somebody goes down, it's going to have to be behind an established number one stud. Go up. What I hope happens is LaFleur brings him in Green Bay, and then we just have a explosion up in Green Bay with all the quarterbacks there.
That would be good. But, while we're on the subject of the NFL, and, it was just today that, we heard about the passing of former NFL coach. How about the winningest coach in NFL history, Don Shula, at the age of 90? And we talk about the Belichicks and this, that, and the other, and Lombardis and so forth. Here's a guy that coached in the NFL for 33 years, had 31 winning seasons.
That's pretty good, I think.
I'd say that's pretty good.
Do you know what? Say something awful. When I saw it trending on Twitter this morning, I swear to God, Rick, I had in my head that he had already passed away. I don't know where I got that from, if they'd announced a while back he was sick or something. I was like, why are we talking about this now? And then it turns out it had just happened then. So I felt like kind of a stooge for that.
Well, yeah, I knew he had some health problems, but I hadn't heard anything that it was very serious. But, he always was more or less a low profile type of guy. And, I don't know really what it was. I assume it was just natural causes. It wasn't COVID-19 or any of that kind of thing from what I understand. But, the last NFL coach of an undefeated team and, sorely missed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And a name that kind of gets looked over too much, right? And it seems to always revolve around Belichick conversation, right? Look, Belichick's probably the best coach ever, somebody says, and that's what they say. He's right up there with Lombardi, with Bill Walsh. People forget Don Shula an awful lot for as successful as that man was in his career.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the man won 3 Super Bowls, 2 with Miami and 1 with Baltimore. And so one of few coaches, I don't know how many there are without really having to go look, but there's not that many coaches that have won more than 1.
No, it's a little harder than it looks, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you have Lombardi, you have Shula, Noel, Obviously Belichick. And Tomlin win two?
No, he only won one.
Yeah, he's only won one. Yeah. So, I mean, oh, and of course Walsh.
Yeah.
But yeah, not many.
Jimmy Johnson, he's got a couple, right?
Yeah, I guess he won two with Dallas. You're right, and probably Reeves with Denver.
Yeah, they got those two in a row. Yeah, was it still Reeves? Probably.
I think, but I couldn't swear to it. But anyway, not that many.
All right.
And yeah, good coach. Let's just leave it at
that. Yeah, not a whole lot you can say. So let's go back to the quarterback position, Rick. We've mentioned it a couple times. The Bears already electing not to pick up that 50-year option on Mitch Trubisky. This is one that, boy, it's just going to haunt an organization for a long time when you traded up unnecessarily to get him, and the next two quarterbacks taken were named Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson.
Right.
Bad tidings in Chicago right now.
Yeah, it really is. And you have to really scratch your head on that one because, I mean, that was a head scratcher even when they made the move. And it wasn't so much saying why they move up to get, why did they, bypass Mahomes. I mean, Jackson was in the conversation. I don't remember a lot of talk about Mahomes during that. But them just moving up then to take Trubisky when, he was going to be there anyway.
Right, yeah.
Was the whole narrative.
What I'm curious to see when he ends up somewhere else and the situation will mean everything. Boy, he's so big. He's so talented. Obviously inaccurate, but there's something about Chicago, Rick. I mean, they had Jim McMahon for, an hour and a half, and that was the last thing they had as a reasonable facsimile of an NFL quarterback. And you have to go back to, I don't know, Rick, name some guy in the 50s or 60s who was a great quarterback, since then. I do not know why that team cannot run down a quarterback.
I know. You just can't really think in the modern era of any good Chicago quarterback, really. Jim McMahon won the Super Bowl, but you kind of lump him in there with Trent Dilfer.
Right, exactly.
Not taking anything away from them. They played good enough, but let's face it, these were defensive juggernauts that it would take a heck of a poor performance to blow that game. That's for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know why they can't seem to find a quarterback. It's certainly, you can blame it on the scouting system, but this isn't the same scouts that have been around since the 70s. I mean, surely they can hire somebody that can recognize some quarterback talent.
And they brought in defensive minds at coaches. They brought in offensive minds at coach, and they just can't seem to hit on it. But this really becomes about, as always, scheme fit. Horses for courses, I think they say, if I have that right. So I just wonder, and we'll never know, so it's fun. We can speculate, and nobody could say we're wrong. What would have happened if they traded up and they took Patrick Mahomes and Mitch Trubisky went to Andy Reid in Kansas City? He obviously doesn't play the same type of game Mahomes does, but what are we saying about Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes is not doing what he's doing now if he goes to Chicago. He may still be a great quarterback because that type of talent, even in a bad offense, would shine through. But he'd be nowhere near what he is now, and I'd love to know what Mitch Trubisky would do under the tutelage of an Andy Reid.
Yeah, I mean, that would be very interesting. I mean, he's not going to be as talented, that's for sure. And just getting to your little thing here. I pulled up some stuff. Let's go back to, I guess the most notable Chicago Bear quarterback would have been 1954 with George Blanda.
We got to go back that far.
But let's go up to, we're going to start in 1976. I'm going to name you every starting quarterback.
All right. You won't be able to hear them, Rick, but I'm going to hit the sound effects here, my dinger, my buzzer.
Okay, so I'll give you a little pause.
All right.
76 to 78, Bob Avellini. He was taken over in 78 and he quarterbacked some of 79. Mike Phipps, replaced by Vince Evans. Then we got to Jim McMahon era, and he was backed up by Mike Tomczak. So that was probably the best situation. Then they were followed up by Jim Harbaugh in the 90 through 93. Then we have a real run of Steve Walsh, Eric Kramer, Dave Craig, and then Shane Matthews in 99. Jay Cutler was probably the next best run in 2009.
So I would never let him catch a game winner on.
Which he did have some decent years. We can't forget Sexy Rexy Grossman and Kyle Orton years.
Yeah, Sexy Rexy took him to a Super Bowl, for God's sake.
Right, exactly. And, that's been about it. There's been some other guys in there. Craig Krenzel, Cordell Stewart, latter part of his career. Jim Miller, Cade McNown, on and on. But yeah, you're right. It just doesn't get real good past the Jim McMahon, Jay Cutler years at all.
Yeah, and I hope Trubisky gets an opportunity somewhere with some type of competent franchise, because it's just, he's too big, he's too fast, he's too talented to be. Well, I say that. How many quarterbacks have that? First overall quarterbacks that been true? But boy, it really
be one of those great backups somewhere along the line.
Well, and that's the thing. If he's willing to do that, he'll go on and he'll make $150 million in his career, and he'll never have to take another hit outside of practice. So not a bad gig if you can get it.
Exactly.
So speaking of quarterbacks, last thing, and we can move off of this, but big news, and if you're not in Western Pennsylvania, and I assume none of you are in the Pittsburgh area, the big news locally is everybody angry that Jameis Winston signs for essentially, after the signing bonus, less than $1 million a year. And I like to think, Rick, I was the headwaters on this when I was screaming for the Steelers to bring in Jameis Winston before last season ended. I was already there assuming he wasn't going to be back. A lot of media, a lot of folks in Pittsburgh, they didn't get it from me, but they kind of caught on after the fact a little bit. And then when you see him go for that low amount, they thought, he could have definitely been here, been the heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger. But boy, some of the national, and it's good, getting real crazy now, where Adam Shine, for whatever reason, I don't know what Big Ben did to Adam Shine, just crushing him. Crushing the Steelers organization. The narrative is again, because we had all that narrative where before Antonio Brown went completely insane, before everybody realized it, they were blaming the breakdown of that relationship on Ben Roethlisberger. Now everyone's saying he quit on the team last year. He could have come back with that elbow. And now, he's never going to be the same again. The Steelers should have drafted a quarterback, should have signed Jameis Winston, should sign Cam Newton. Rick, I'm just trying to figure out why in the world does the national media especially hate Ben Roethlisberger so much? I can't put my finger on it.
Well, Ben Roethlisberger, you recall, early in his career really didn't endear himself to a lot of people.
Well, yeah.
Let's face facts, and deservedly so, with some of his off-field activities, accusations, etc. He's still not a very personable guy. I mean, look, we're still blocked from him on Twitter, and we've never ever even attempted to tweet the guy.
I forgot when they did that. They just went around and blocked every blog in the country.
I mean, there's a certain aspect of Ben Roethlisberger that rubs people the wrong way, and somehow I don't blame them in a lot of aspects, but to just make up stuff like he'll never be the same, he quit on his team. Well, if you've ever paid attention to Pittsburgh sports, we know Ben Roethlisberger didn't quit on the team.
Right.
And to say that he will never be the same, look, this is a guy that's 38 years old. He just took a year off and got some reconstructive surgery on his elbow. Not only is the elbow now going to be stronger because he took all that time off and didn't force himself back, the rest of the dings and bangs in his bodies have healed up. And to say that he'll never be the same, if the elbow's not 100%, that could be right. But if they fixed it, he's going to be better than he was in the last couple of years. And I think it's all up to the Pittsburgh Steelers to put the tools around him. And I think he's got enough pieces. I really wish that their running game, to me, is kind of suspect as far as the durability of Connors, obviously. Benny Snell isn't getting a lot of love, even though the man runs hard. And he has a nasty attitude. Jalen Samuels is underwhelming to me. But, Juju, he loves Juju. We saw the emergence of DeAndre Johnson. Hopefully they don't bring back who am I missing?
At the wide receiver?
Yeah. Who am I missing?
Well, you still have the kid from Oklahoma
James
State.
Washington. Yeah, James Washington improved. I'm sorry. Yeah, I blanked on his name. But, yeah, I think that core's okay. So, I don't know. I don't know where the vitriol comes from other than his past, and they just don't like him. Yeah, which I said is understandable, but it's certainly not fair journalism by any stretch. It's opinion. It's opinion is what it is.
Right. What's weird with that, and it always comes to that from the fans, especially if you ever see a tweet about Ben Roethlisberger, the first 25 comments are from a Bengals, Browns, or Ravens fan calling him Rapelessburger. And I got to be honest, I don't know if it's because I'm a Steeler fan. Maybe I'm an insensitive type. It's not something all these years later that really even pops in my head about him. He kind of had, after that motorcycle accident, which was after the previous incident, it seemed like he sort of got his stuff together. He grew up, he got married, he's got a brood of kids. Around here, we don't tend to think about this as much. It seems to me nationally, especially national media, this is still number one, the headline. I don't know if he wasn't even charged, was he, Rick? Or he certainly wasn't found guilty. He was just investigated in this. And look, that thing will follow you around forever. We're seeing it in our national politics now, right? And if it was true, it's awful, and he probably should have been gone. But that seems to be the first narrative, and they try to put that on him in terms of his play and in terms of going forward. And just the amount of vitriol, and then Adam Schein going off again about the only reason Steelers didn't bring in Winston or draft a quarterback is because Ben Roethlisberger didn't want it, and he was frosty with Mason Rudolph when he come in. I'm sorry, if you think, you're a national NFL writer, you know better than this. If you think the Steelers are letting a 38-year-old quarterback dictate anything they do in building their team and their front office operations, you don't know near as much as you think you know. It's very, very strange to me.
No, he's certainly going to have a lot of input if it came to, they're going to cut wide receiver A or wide receiver B. He may say, I kind of like the reads that wide receiver B gives a little bit better than A. I think I can work with him a little better. Okay, well, maybe they'll cut A instead. But as far as I don't want you to sign this guy because I don't want to have to be a mentor or I don't like him. I agree with you. I think that's ridiculous. And getting back to Jameis Winston a little bit, by the way, I do think that they did make a mistake. If they did inquire about him, I don't know if they did or not. If they did inquire about him and they could have picked him up for $1 million, shame on them.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that would have been a steal. He's not going to be taking Ben Roethlisberger's place. It's just like we talked about with the previous conversation with Dak Prescott and Andy Dalton. He's not threatening to take this number one starting position away by any stretch of imagination. But it would be nice to have the NFL's leading passer as a backup. Just as an insurance policy.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty decent insurance policy. And I still don't understand. There's conflicting reports. Some national outlets are, I talked on the show last week. There was stories out there that the Steelers not only offered Winston, offered him more, and he chose to go to New Orleans. Now, Kevin Colbert's categorically denying ever even speaking to him, let alone having a deal in place, and nobody can seem to agree on what's true. I don't know. But it just really surprised. Look, I am no big fan of Ben Roethlisberger. If anybody, I'm a big fan of the team, but if anybody's been giving him a hard time, it's me and it's us on this show. You know, we always talked about the comparison to Roberto Clemente. You ask him how he's doing, instead of saying good, it's start breaking down every nick and scrape. And he is a drama queen, and he probably wasn't great with the media in the beginning, but it's just, this narrative is crazy to me. The national media can't get him out of town fast enough. He's horrible. Meanwhile, a 43-year-old quarterback, albeit probably the greatest quarterback of all time, at least arguably, now 43 years old, picks up, leaves the only situation he's ever known, heads down south, and he's going to be great again. Tampa's winning the Super Bowl. You know, this guy's Roethlisberger's 5 years younger, and the Steelers are foolish because he's just done. It's personal. It really is. It feels like it's more personal than actual reporting.
I agree 100%, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays off. And you know, we are in Western Pennsylvania, so obviously I like to see the Steelers do well. But on another note, I would like to just see him just have a fantastic year of about 4,800 to 5,000 yards and 38, 40 touchdowns and 10 picks, and say, yeah, I'm not the same. I'm better.
Yeah. It would be fun to say. I wish I had it like that. So, Rick, you watching The Last Dance or not?
I've only watched the one episode, and I've got some recorded, but I just haven't sat down to watch them yet.
Here's the one thing I am happy. First of all, it's fantastically done. There's nothing else on, which probably makes it more gooder.
True.
Makes it more gooder. I almost said that, Rick. It makes it better than it might have otherwise had been with nothing else going on. But I can't take my eyes off this thing. And my biggest takeaway 6 episodes in, anytime one of you dumb millennials are going to start trying to argue to me that LeBron James is the greatest ever, that he is better than Michael Jordan, I'm going to slap you about the head and face. This is absurd, the willingness of this guy to win. And we can probably agree that Charles Barkley is one of the, 25 best players to have ever played in the NBA. I'm sure he fits in there somewhere. He says in an interview back then when the Bulls, I believe it was the 3rd title when the Bulls beat the Suns, and Charles Barkley said, that was the first time in my life I just realized there was somebody better than me at playing basketball. And, you know, he's averaging 40 points in finals. This guy is so dominant. It is unbelievable. And any of this LeBron James stuff, as great a player as he is, and LeBron James is going to end as a top 5 to 10 player in the history of this league, he is not at all on Michael Jordan's level.
I agree. You know that, and it's kind of funny because just getting off the subject a little bit. I think it was Isaiah Thomas put out some list, the top 5, the toughest basketball players he ever played against, and he listed, I can't remember the exact order, but Michael was 4th. And they, you know, and of course the media guys, this is ludicrous. Why are you saying this? Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player in the world. We know that. But I think what he was trying to put out, Isaiah Thomas was putting out against players he actually had to play against. You know what I'm saying? Like more one-on-one, say, against Magic or Bird or whoever it was, and maybe didn't have the full 48-minute confrontation with a Michael Jordan. But look, Michael Jordan to me is far and away the best basketball player that ever played. And you know how I feel about Wilt Chamberlain.
Right, exactly.
And all you millennials can scoff. No, he didn't play against 6-foot white guys either, okay? But yeah, he is just so dominant. And we covered a little bit last week or whenever it was we were talking about when I think it was, his rookie year, he goes into the room, there's Coke on the left and weed on the right and the women in the corner. He just turned around and walked out. That's not what he was about. And I mean, that is discipline. Now they're trying to make a big deal about the gambling. I remember when all that happened. It was just a big deal.
Yeah, it felt like nonsense back then, let alone
and
reflect. And that was very interesting seeing that last night. They covered that a lot, and I was really glad they got into the whole Republicans buy sneakers too bit. And and I'll tell you what, it was fun to watch. I've been watching this with my daughter, 13 years old. You know how little I pay attention to, Rick, and know about politics, so you can imagine how much my 13-year-old daughter then is aware of anything going on in the world. And so they're talking in the show, Rick, when you get an opportunity to watch it. Apparently there was some Senate seat or governor, something in North Carolina. And there was a black candidate running for, and I can't remember you'd know the guy if I said him, whoever the senator was or whatever it was in North Carolina, that seemed to be, at least was painted in the documentary, and I assume it's true, was very racist and very...
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name. He's a billion years old too, I think.
Yeah, well, he's probably
Strom. No, it wasn't Strom. I can't.
It was one of those common names, and there was a kind of a young, upstart, exciting black guy running against him, and so they were trying to get, as a North Carolina resident, they were trying to get Michael Jordan to endorse him. That's where this whole thing came from, and Michael explained the whole Republicans wear sneakers too. You know, he basically said, first of all, that got way overblown. It was a joke, off the cuff comment he made to make Horace Grant laugh because he was sitting beside him, which I tended to believe. Jordan's come off very sincere throughout this whole thing in these interviews. But then, of course, they brought on all these different civil rights leaders, journalists, things like that they're interviewing for this documentary. Still all 30 years later, expressing disappointment that Michael Jordan didn't get involved. And my daughter looks at me and says, "Dad, why do they care what a basketball player thinks about politics?" From the mouth of babes, right? You know, what a perfect question. That's what he was saying, and that was his response to it. He said, in reality, I was singularly, I can't say that word, focused on basketball. I'm a basketball player. I'm trying to win a third championship. This wasn't something, I wasn't going to take a stand on it. I didn't know anything about this. And all these years, still getting crucified for saying that. But for somebody kind of innocent and not knowing anything about the political world and the, off the field sports world, my daughter, she just nailed it. She said, why would they care what some basketball player thinks about politics?
Well, and that's the thing, Rick. You fast forward to 2020. Now all of a sudden, and, because most of the media is right there with it, when some 25-year-old millionaire sports star voices something, especially if it goes along with their narrative, all of a sudden this guy's some sort of a sage.
True.
It just knows what I should be thinking or what you should be feeling or what Joe Schmo should be buying at the store. And, to me, it's ludicrous. Sports stars, when I was a kid, were peddling soda pop or chewing tobacco or
right.
whatever the case may be. They didn't tell me what I should be doing with my life other than, try hard, that kind of thing, to stay out of trouble, blah, 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 like anybody would. But now all of a sudden, everybody seems to be on this narrative. And now that there is a narrative, it doesn't matter what sport you're in or how old you are. This guy's brilliant. He knows exactly what you need to be doing.
And it's funny what we've become, and I think a lot of this has to do with social media too, Rick. How many times have you read? I can remember seeing this when the Kaepernick situation was really at its apex. Anything going on even nationally, news-wise or politically or anything to that level. How many times do you see some jackwagon on Twitter saying, day 24 and fill in the sports star, LeBron James, Sidney Crosby, so-and-so, hasn't said anything about this awful thing? Why would he? What are you talking about? Even the political leaders, I'll never understand, this happened and it's been 3 days and Senator Bill Smith hasn't said a word. We got to get him out. What are you talking about? I don't understand.
Yeah, all of a sudden this person's not allowed to work. He needs to resign his position no matter what it is immediately. He should never work again. They should put his family in slave labor camps and he should be crucified. I mean, I don't know why all of a sudden, because you don't come out with tears streaming down your face over every little thing that offends somebody, that you shouldn't be allowed to work for your living. It blows my mind. Everybody is so sad about everything. And I did it as a joke. I got it on Twitter just today. I saw a tweet from that, the ESPN girl, Jamel.
Oh, Jamel Hill. I thought I had her blocked. Did you unblock her? I couldn't take her stuff anymore.
I didn't unblock any. Anyway, something about they had the Spanish word for black on a crayon. And she had this, what is this racist blankety blank?
Over a crayon?
On a crayon, because it had, negro is Spanish for black.
Right.
Okay. It's the masculine form of black. And what is this racial blankety blank? So obviously these people, we need to, ban Crayola now and all this kind of stuff. So I, just as a joke, because that's what I do, I said, this is not racist at all. If anything, it's sexist because negro is masculine.
See, I don't know any of that.
And they got on and I'm just shaken by this. I mean, the people were actually responding, oh, wow, you're right. This is ridiculous. And I'm like, holy moly, this is a joke. And these people actually thought it was serious.
You can't make jokes. But I don't know.
A Spanish word for a color, for crying out loud. I don't get it. But if they didn't put Spanish on, then it would be
xenophobic. Isn't that the thing?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I don't understand what people want.
I just, what baffles my mind is I have never once, when something terrible happened, sat there and thought, boy, I wonder what Andre Dawson thinks about this. Just to throw out a random sports name that came to mind is the whole world's going nuts.
What would Ric Flair do?
Yeah. He'd drink a bunch of beers and yell, woo! That's what Ric Flair would do. I mean, come on.
Yeah, pick up a woman. I don't know. But, hey, on a lighter note, I come across Jamarcus Russell's name.
Ooh, today. Blast from the past.
Little story put out by a Nick Poor. And, it just starts off, we all know that Jamarcus Russell was the number 1 overall pick by the Oakland Raiders back, get this, Rick, back in 2007. That was 13 years ago already.
Doesn't seem that long.
No. But anyway, apparently, Jamarcus really wasn't interested in he just kind of thought he was going to be an excellent quarterback, and he didn't really have to try to be one. Bruce Gradkowski was his backup at the time, claims he had to bribe Jamarcus Russell with cheeseburgers in order to get him to watch game tape. And,
no cash, straight cheeseburgers, homie.
Yeah, cheeseburgers. And so putting aside the healthy impact of eating that many burgers, Russell's clear disinterest in watching tape helps add context to this next part of the story. Where was it? Oh, yeah. Former New York Giants linebacker David Deal recounted how coaches caught Russell what really wasn't watching game videos. So what they used to do to him is they would give him blank cassette tapes and send them home and tell him to watch the blitz packages and so forth. And he would come in and say, yeah, I got them.
And it was a blank.
Yeah, they were blank tapes, and he claimed that he watched all the tapes, and he's got the blitz packages down, and et cetera, et cetera.
Golly, wonder why it didn't work out.
I have no idea. None at all.
So, Rick, you mentioned before we went on the air, we got about 4 minutes left here. There's some news came out of the NCAA coming down on Louisville and Rick Pitino. I was hoping you could fill me and maybe a few listeners who hadn't had a chance to read it yet what's going on.
I'm not real sure of all the allegations. I guess they were notified, but it just seems really strange. I mean, you remember, of course, Denny Crum, and I'm using the air quotes, retired from Louisville as soon as Rick Pitino in 2001 became available.
Right, yeah.
And they just couldn't get him retired soon enough. And there's a stretch of about 5 or 6 years that Louisville is 0-30 because they have forfeited all those games.
Right.
And now he left Louisville, 5 years ago?
Going on that, pretty close
something like
to
that.
Yeah.
These penalties can impact Iona now, who actually gambled and threw an olive branch of Rick Pitino and hired him as their new coach in hopes of making Iona prominent, at least in their conference, and making some tournament berths. But now it looks like these penalties are going to reach into his coaching career at Iona. And it's going to be interesting to see what comes down out of all this.
And you had to know it was coming. I think Iona was probably prepared for that. I don't know what sanctions, maybe a suspension for Pitino. Is that what comes out of this? You can't, I wouldn't think you can't take scholarships from Iona. You can't give them a postseason ban. You could do that to Pitino, but maybe I'm wrong. Nothing the NCAA does surprises me, so who knows?
I can't see. Iona did nothing wrong, so I can't see them losing scholarships, obviously. But he has left a trail of blood for years now. And, I mean, they were investigated at Kentucky. I don't know really if anything came of that. But then we had the escort sex scandal at Louisville. And then the recruiting violations, free airline tickets.
The Adidas thing, all of that.
Adidas, exactly. And they forfeited conference titles, national championship, and season wins, and I think player awards as well, I believe, because they were deemed on an illegal team. So, I mean, this guy is really suspect in my mind.
I'll tell you what, Rick, as a guy who is a huge fan of a basketball team that was never any good, was just good enough to get knocked out of the tournament earlier than you thought they would for several years, and then it has been bad for a lot of years, being a fan of the Pitt Panthers and a season ticket holder. I'll tell you this: I think Jeff Capel, if before Jeff Capel got hired, because I think Jeff Capel is turning this thing around. That's
making some nice signings right now.
So that's another conversation for another day. But before they hired Jeff Capel, after this Stallings thing, if you'd have told me, all right, Rick, here's what's going to happen. Rick Pitino's coming in here. You're going to get 5-star on top of 5-star. You're going to make deep tournament runs. You're going to have a national championship. And then in 7 years, it's all going away. And we're taking the banners down. I'll take it. I'll take it because I'm not going to forget the memories of them going through and winning. I think that's what Iona's saying. Yeah, all right, we'll take it. So bring it on.
Yeah.
We're Iona.
He can sit for 3 games. What do we care? Yeah.
In our conference, you don't need that much good coaching to get out of the conference. We just need him to recruiting for the tournament.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's strange. But, I guess we got to get moving here. We only got less than a minute to go, so I'll let you close us out.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Sorry for the short show. For those of you listening live, thanks for sticking with us as the gremlins in the system keep going. Go ahead and check out the full archive at Asylum Football on Twitter. It's just sports123 at Gmail, and, of course, 12 Ounce Sports at 12OZ Sports on Twitter. Until next time, we'll see you.
Take care.